1981 looked like any other glittering year in Hollywood. The stars were shining, the box offices were booming, and the red carpets were rolled out like clockwork. But beneath the glamour, something strange was happening. Behind closed studio doors, executives were panicking. New technology was threatening to break their monopoly. Old legends were losing power. And a wave of wild creativity, from werewolf transformations to smellable movies, was about to rewrite everything audiences thought they knew about cinema. Most people remember the 80s for its neon lights, big hair, and blockbuster dreams. But if you look closer, it was 1981 that quietly changed everything. From the rise of home video, to the rebirth of adventure movies, and the first spark of computer-generated effects, this was the year Hollywood's past collided head-on with its future. And it all started with a camera that could fit in your hands. The invention that shook Hollywood. In early January of 1981, inside a bustling convention center in Las Vegas, JVC and Sony unveiled something that made studio executives break into a cold sweat. A video camera that could record directly onto a cassette tape, the world's first camcorder. To most people walking by the booth, it just looked like another gadget. But to anyone working in film, it was a ticking time bomb. Until that point, Hollywood controlled everything. Movies were made on expensive film stock, edited in studios, and distributed through theaters. But this device, a box with a lens, a handle, and a cassette slot, threatened to hand that power to anyone with a few $100s and an idea. At the time, the camcorder wasn't even available for sale. But insiders could already sense what was coming. Within a few years, ordinary people would be filming weddings, birthdays, and soon, entire independent movies. The walls of Hollywood were beginning to crack. And while cameras were shrinking, something else was growing. A new kind of monster that would redefine horror forever. The werewolves that changed horror. March of 1981. Director Joe Dante releases The Howling, a strange, funny, and terrifying film about a reporter who stumbles into a mysterious retreat filled with people who might or might not be werewolves. What audiences didn't know was that The Howling wasn't just another horror movie. It was the beginning of a quiet rivalry between two filmmakers who would define 80s horror, Joe Dante and John Landis. Both directors had been working with the same makeup genius, Rick Baker, a man who could turn latex and glue into living nightmares. Baker was supposed to work on Landis's dream project, An American Werewolf in London, but Landis had delayed production for years, so Baker took a small side job helping Joe Dante first. The result? A jaw-dropping transformation sequence that no one had ever seen before. Muscles stretching, bones cracking, skin morphing in real time. Audiences screamed, critics raved, and The Howling became a cult classic. When Landis finally made his werewolf film later that same year, Baker's name was on that one too, and he won the very first Academy Award for Best Makeup for it. Two competing werewolf movies, one makeup artist, one new Oscar category, and a genre reborn. But horror wasn't the only thing getting darker. So were the streets of American cinema. The rise of realism and the criminal underground. In late March of 1981, audiences sat down for something different. A movie that didn't sparkle, didn't dazzle, and didn't comfort. Michael Mann's Thief introduced them to a new kind of crime story. Cold, methodical, and disturbingly real. James Caan played a safecracker who just wanted out a man who could crack steel vaults but couldn't escape the system that owned him. The movie felt different because it was different. It was Mann's first time directing a feature film, and instead of using lush orchestras or dramatic cues, he used a futuristic electronic score by the German band Tangerine Dream. The pulsating synths gave the movie an edge, mechanical, haunting, modern. Critics didn't know what to make of it, but the next generation of filmmakers sure did. Thief became the blueprint for Mann's later masterpieces like Heat, and the entire aesthetic of Miami Vice. That neon-soaked, morally gray world. It all started in 1981. And just as audiences were falling in love with gritty realism, Hollywood reminded everyone it still believed in heroes who could fly. Superman, power shifts, and studio wars. When Superman 2 hit theaters in April of 1981, fans were thrilled to see Christopher Reeve back in the cape. But what they didn't know was that the film's real battle wasn't between Superman and the villains. It was between two directors. Richard Donner, who directed the first Superman, had been fired halfway through filming the sequel. The studio brought in Richard Lester to finish the job, leading to a creative tug-of-war that left fans divided. Some scenes had Donner's dramatic style, others had Lester's slapstick humor. Despite the chaos, the movie was a massive hit, but behind the scenes, it exposed just how ruthless the studios had become. And right around that time, a real-life power play shook Hollywood to its core. In May of 1981, MGM bought United Artists, one of the most legendary names in film history, for a staggering $250 million. Founded by Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford in the silent era, United Artists had once symbolized freedom for filmmakers. Now, it was just another trophy in a corporate empire. Hollywood was turning from an art form into an industry. But even in the middle of all that, one man was determined to bring back the magic of old-school adventure. The return of adventure and the birth of a legend. Summer 1981. Moviegoers sit in the dark as a lone figure steps into frame, a leather jacket, a whip, and a hat pulled low over his eyes. Raiders of the Lost Ark had arrived. Directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by George Lucas, Raiders wasn't just another action film. It was a love letter to the old adventure serials of the 1930s and 40s. Spielberg had something to prove after the lukewarm reception to 1941, and Lucas wanted to show he could build a franchise outside Star Wars. The production was grueling. Real snakes, collapsing sets, stunts so dangerous they barely got insurance. But the result was lightning in a bottle. Raiders of the Lost Ark became the highest-grossing film of the year and introduced the world to Indiana Jones, a hero who was flawed, funny, and irresistibly human. It was the dawn of the modern blockbuster, fast, thrilling, and built for repeat viewings. But while Spielberg and Lucas were rewriting adventure cinema, others were experimenting with ideas so bizarre they had to be smelled to be believed. The weirdest year in cinema history. Just a few weeks before Raiders hit theaters, director John Waters was cooking up something truly aromatic. His comedy Polyester introduced an audience gimmick called Odorama. When you bought a ticket, you received a scratch and sniff card with 10 numbered spots. During the movie, a number would flash on screen telling you when to scratch and sniff. The scents ranged from flowers and perfume to less pleasant aromas like gasoline and, yes, even feces. It was disgusting. It was hilarious. It was pure John Waters. And it marked the final gasp of an era when Hollywood would try almost anything to get people back into theaters. That same year, another visionary was experimenting in a very different direction. Michael Crichton's Looker quietly made history as the first film to feature a computer-generated 3D human model, the ancestor of all digital characters to come. No one knew it then, but that brief glimpse of CGI in 1981 was the seed of what would one day become Jurassic Park, Avatar, and the entire Marvel universe. Hollywood was officially stepping into the future, but it was also saying goodbye to the past. Icons rising, legends falling. By mid-1981, the old studio system was gone. The new generation was hungry, rebellious, and ready to make their mark. Take Mel Brooks, for example. His film, History of the World, Part 1, hit theaters that June, a parody of human civilization filled with musical numbers, crude jokes, and outrageous gags. Critics were split, but the movie became a cult favorite, proving that satire still had a place in a blockbuster world. Elsewhere, a young actor named Tom Cruise appeared on screen for the first time in Endless Love. It was a small part, just one line, but it was enough. Within 3 years, he'd be leading Risky Business and Top Gun. Then there was Denzel Washington, starring in his debut film, Carbon Copy. It was a light comedy that didn't make much noise at the time, but it quietly introduced one of the most commanding actors of his generation. But not every debut had a happy ending. Mommy Dearest, starring Faye Dunaway as Joan Crawford, was supposed to be an Oscar contender. Instead, it became infamous for its over-the-top performance and that unforgettable line, "No wire hangers, ever." The movie flopped, critics mocked it, but years later, it became a camp classic. The message was clear: even in failure, Hollywood could find immortality. And as the old guard faded, a new breed of anti-hero was waiting just around the corner. The anti-heroes of the apocalypse. By Christmas Eve of 1981, audiences were exhausted. They'd seen monsters, heroes, and gods, but what came next was something else entirely, a world burned to the ground. From Australia came Mad Max 2, retitled The Road Warrior for American audiences. It was brutal, fast, and relentless, a ballet of chaos in a desert wasteland. Mel Gibson, a relative unknown, became a global superstar overnight. The film's raw energy and practical stunts redefined what action could be. There were no superheroes here, no happy endings, just survival, speed, and fire. The irony? The Road Warrior cost a fraction of the average Hollywood blockbuster, but its influence would echo for decades. From The Terminator to Fury Road, that dusty, gasoline-soaked vision of the apocalypse started right here in 1981. And while Mad Max was tearing across the outback, something else was quietly happening: the first seeds of globalization in filmmaking. Studios realized they could shoot overseas, save money, and still make hits. The film industry was no longer just Hollywood. It was becoming international. The year that never ended. By the end of 1981, Hollywood had completely transformed, even if no one realized it yet. Camcorders had planted the idea of home video. Horror had evolved into an art form. Adventure films had rediscovered their soul. CGI was being born in a laboratory, and corporate buyouts had turned studios into financial machines. It was a year of contradictions, innovation and nostalgia, creativity and greed, passion and profit. A year when the old dream of Hollywood as a magical kingdom finally collided with reality. And yet, that chaos created the modern movie landscape we know today. Every streaming service, every superhero franchise, every viral indie filmmaker owes a quiet debt to 1981. Because that was the year everything changed, not with a bang, but with a flicker of light on a screen, the hum of a camcorder, and the smell of gasoline in the air. Conclusion: the forgotten revolution. Most people talk about the 80s as if it began with E.T. or Back to the Future. But the real revolution started earlier, in a year most have forgotten. 1981 wasn't just another 12 months on the Hollywood calendar. It was a reset button. The end of one era and the messy birth of another. Behind the nostalgia, there were power struggles, creative risks, and a few wild ideas that would echo for generations. So the next time you watch a massive blockbuster or stream a movie made on someone's phone, remember, it all began in a year when nobody was paying attention. The year the monsters roared, the heroes rose, and the cameras finally pointed back at us. 1981, the year Hollywood secretly changed forever.